Today is a very challenging task for me because I'm supposed to summarize the entire Bhaja Govindam in a one short session of less than 60 minutes. I'll try my best. But before I get going, I want to start with a couple of stories of Shankara's life, which I have not shared with you before, and how various incidents in anybody's life makes all the difference in the rest of the life of that individual. When Shankara was a young brahmachari, he would go out holy begging for food. Once he stood in front of a small hut and, as usual, said, Om Bhavati Vikshandehi. Kindly, after taking the name of God, Om, offer me some food of sustenance. The lady who lived in that house was pretty old and poor. She had absolutely had nothing to offer to this poor Shankara who had come begging for food as a brahmachari. She had saved one amalaka fruit. I don't know how people have seen amalaka, but I enjoyed amalaka myself. I would climb on the trees. And she had kept it in such a way that in case of she getting sick, it's considered to be medicinal use. So that's the only thing that was left in her house. And she took that amalaka fruit out and offered it to him in Kavandalu and blessed him. May your self-knowledge shine like Karatala Amalakavat. That means let your self-knowledge shine like the Amalaka in your palm. This particular situation touched young Shankara's heart so much. He was moved, and instantly he sat down and prayed to Goddess Mahalakshmi. And amazingly, she was relieved of her poverty. The story goes that her courtyard was immediately filled with a shower of golden amlakas, which came down from the skies. And it's also understood that the poor old woman was a disguised Saraswati, and she basically wanted him to continue his studies and shine with his self-knowledge. And this was a symbolic of Shankara's work, which was performing two functions of Vedas. One is called Abhyudaya, that means secular welfare, and Nishreyas, the spiritual Sumambonan, that goes along with all the mathas that he established all through the country. Second story of his pertains to the time he was about 16 years of age, when he had written this commentary on Brahma Sutras. And one day, an old man knocked on his door and asked him whether he would be happy to chat with him and answer some of the questions based upon his commentary that he had heard about. He was a very powerful debater, that old man, and challenged him on several comments and interpretations that Shankara had made, and went on for several hours. But after he had answered every comment and a query to the satisfaction, that old man revealed himself, who was that immortal sage Vyasa. Immortal is called in Sanskrit Chiranjiva, who blessed him with additional 16 years of life. So this is the second time in his life that his life was doubled. First, it happened when he was 8 years of age, when he was caught by a crocodile near the adjacent river, and he hurriedly asked his mother to give him a permission to take sannyasa, because that's he wanted all the time. And in that time of crisis, she gave him the permission to take sannyasa, called apat sannyasa. That apat means difficulty. And then he wriggled himself out of the mouth of crocodile. And at that time, he was able to double his life from 8 to 16. And with the meeting Chiranjeev of Vyas, he doubled it to 32. Short life, tremendous accomplishment in his lifetime. So today, as we discuss Bhaja Govindam, at the very beginning, one powerful message came out from the mouth of Adi Shankarcharya. On the banks of the river Ganges, when he saw an old Pandit, Sanskrit scholar, repeating aphorism of grammarian Panini day in and day out, instead of taking the necessary steps to seek enlightenment before the death arrived at his doorsteps, he followed his strong statement with melodious 12 verses, which summarize the wisdom of the entire Vedanta. And of course, remember, they were addressed to his disciples who were all brahmacharis and renunciates. But since it was in a public space, it must be understood that this is a knowledge also passed on to people like who are sansaris like us, to grow ourselves spiritually and perform all the duties that we should do as married individuals. While commenting on this grammarian who was doing nothing else except talking about grammar, he was also reminding that we as human beings should uplift of life. Uddharet atmanatmanam, atmanam avasade, as Sri Krishna says in the 6th chapter. He starts, Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam, Govindam Bhaja Muramade. He asks us to worship Govinda, called us deluded ones, confused ones. What is interesting is his choice of the word Govinda to describe the Brahman, Lord Vishnu, is just perfect. Because Govinda has several meanings, and when talking with Lord Krishna, he is considered the Purnavatar, one of the complete incarnations of Lord Vishnu. As I mentioned to you, go or cow means several meanings. One is cow, Gam Vindatiti Govinda, one who takes care of the cows. But also, as we have discussed in the past, go also means earth. The story goes that there was a Hiranyaksha, a asura or a demon, who caught hold of the earth and took it down to the bottom of the waters. Of course, pralaya, that means all floods all over. It was Govinda who took the incarnation of a Varaha or a boar, killed Hiranyaksha, and brought the earth back from the waters. So Shri Krishna or Govinda is a retriever of the earth. In other words, Govinda is a substratum upon which whole play goes on, and not simply the Lord of cattle, Govinda. Now, go also means sense organs. That means one who impels the sense organs, one who enlivens, gives a chaitanya, the sense organs, and allows them to function, both to experience as well as act. I won't bore you with the quotation that I gave you last time from Kena Upanishad, because when we talk about movements, it involves all the sense organs from vision to hearing to touching and so on and so forth. Go also means speech. So in this sense, Govinda means one divinity which is behind all the speech. Govinda confers speech, the very power because of which all living creatures through the medium of speech convey the knowledge to each other. So the speech is taken to represent the knowledge, the Vedas. So again, Go goes along with the knowledge. I can go on for Govinda with so many different meanings, but I'll stop here. At the very outset, after calling us deluded, he said, he warned us about two dangerous entities in human life. One was a craving or utter greed for human wealth, craving or utter greed for wealth, and getting infatuated with individuals of the opposite sex. The greed of the human being is a significant obstacle in the path of worship. Man not only wants wealth, but unfortunately has a tendency to accumulate it. Shankara doesn't say any grudge against the wealth in this statement. We indeed do require wealth to provide the basic necessities in life, as we have discussed before, for food, for shelter, clothing. Also, as sansaris, married individuals, we have responsibilities to our family members, both nuclear as well as extended. And without money, day-to-day life just cannot be sustained. But what this enlightened teacher of Vedanta is criticizing is our never-ending thirst for money. Instead, he said, we must create in our mind inspiring thoughts of reality, divinity. Karu buddhim manasi vitrishna. So basically, create a spatial thirst to pursue the divinity or reality. That means what we have to do is understand all the qualities what Brahman exhibits and try to emulate and inculcate as a part of our personality. The second obstacle he mentioned was attraction for the opposite sex. To be attracted to opposite sex is normal. But when this attraction becomes infatuation, it takes over the mind and does not allow it to dwell on Govinda. It's important to remember to stay within the bounds of the moral and ethical values established by a society. Shankara never ever suggests that we should suppress our feelings, but because such suppression only results in distortion of the mind. But preoccupation with sense gratification results in a tremendous waste of energy that must be conserved and redirected towards one's own improvement. Remember, we talked about we have quite a few common instincts with animals. Ahara nidra, bhayamaithunam cha, samanyametat, pashubhir narana. The following things which are common for both animals and human beings. Ahar, that means need to appease hunger, you have to eat. Nidra, need to sleep and rest and refresh. Bhaya, fear and hence the need to protect oneself. Maithunam, the need for sense gratification. These natural instincts that are present in animals as well as in human beings. Unfortunately, these are the instincts that are mostly glorified in our present day society. We must remember that we have something special that sets us apart from animals, and that is our adherence to dharma, righteously living with proper values. It goes in Sanskrit, dharmoi tesham vishesha, dharmena hina, pashubhi samana. Dharma is sometimes replaced with buddhiri tesham vishesha. We have been blessed with an intellect, a unique discriminative faculty with which we can think, assign the place of the things which are justifiably theirs, no more, no less. Today, unfortunately, we see the humanity is mostly exhausting itself in the pursuit of artha and kama. Artha is security, kama is sense gratification. When these become predominant, the only impulse in life, dharma or the value of virtue is bound to suffer. In many cases, disappears altogether. Animals act strictly on instincts. We talked about few exceptions during the discussions, but commonly on instincts. But human beings, given the free will capacity to make rational intellectual decisions, they can have the capacity to curb and control the flow of instincts of carnal pleasures and redirect those energies in the service of others towards the causes that are much more noble and divine, such as to gain that vital knowledge of Brahman by regularly praying to Lord Govinda. Shankara then reminded us that since our human existence is ephemeral and life is unstable as a droplet on the lotus leaf, we don't have a moment to waste to find out the right solution for a long-lasting true happiness. Brahman, the infinite, projects itself in the form of a human body due to its sankalpa or parabdha. This Brahman existing in infinite consciousness is divine and all-pervading. This very Brahman functioning in and through its equipment is the individuality known as Jiva and is called Atman. Due to the ignorance of its own true nature, this Jiva is always unsteady and always over agitated. Only when Jiva gains the knowledge of his true nature through the teachings of the Guru and personal heart studies of the scriptures, the enlightened teachers who enters in one's life only to divine grace, that individual remains no longer ignorant and returns back once again to merge in the waters of consciousness just around us, just the way the dreamer awakens in the knowledge that was simply a dream. Sri Shankara indicated that our relationship in our daily life are simply the roles that we play. While playing these roles, he suggested that there be love, that there be charity, that there be compassion, and most importantly, that there be service towards others. Such relationship must be free from demands and intense attachment, because such intense attachment lead to dependence. We must find out as to who we really are and the purpose of human life. Even though these family relationships are absolutely important and essential, Shankara agreed that they should not be pursued to total exclusion of fulfilling all the four essential goals of human life, four purusharthas, and most importantly, the final one, the moksha. Shankara then laid down step-by-step approach to accomplish that very goal by emphasizing the glory of satsanga, calling the goal-oriented human beings discriminative and thoughtful individuals, call him Kashchit Dhira, who want to see the Pratyaksha Atman. Pratyagatman, Ekshad means to see, withdraw their attention from their usual preoccupation in the pursuit of the material wealth because they want immortality. Amrutatvam Ichan is from Katha Upanishad. Remember though, when we talk about withdrawal, people confuse it being isolated. Only thing what you need to do is the relationship with the world must change. That means the relationship is no longer exploiting, but one of giving. It's a relationship of worship. They both acquire an abiding mind, those individuals, a mind with utmost faith and shraddha. And the shraddha is not a blind faith, but it's instead utmost willingness to advance the studies till their goal is reached through personal conviction. They maintain a positive outlook that they would reach that goal to answer the fundamental questions of life while entertaining no negative thoughts at all. Shraddha means absolute confidence, utmost sincerity to pursue God, an intense longing to reach that goal. Let's review the steps he carefully laid down for us. Satsangatve nitsangatva. Sangha means company or attachment. Nitsangatva means detachment or non-attachment. So satsanga, the company of good, creates the freedom from unhealthy attachment or attachment in the wrong type of individuals who can influence our behavior. When there is attachment of good, there's detachment from the bad. Thus, when we keep the company of good, we slowly grow out of the influence of the bad individuals. Attachment is a dependence on the world. Very often, giving up attachment mistakenly means giving up contact with the family or running away from the world altogether. But only the dependence on them has to be given up. To have love for your family and friends is not an attachment. Let me repeat, not an attachment. When the sense of overwhelming unhealthy attachment is withdrawn, the selfish desires have dissipated, the mind becomes clear, slowly becoming free from moha or delusion. Water becomes clean and transparent when the dirt is no longer there. Mind is just like water. When it's turbulent, it's very difficult to see. But when the mind becomes calm, everything becomes clear. The delusion is no longer there, and all delusory false values disappear. The state of nirmohatvam, or clarity of vision, returns as the mind gets pure. This purification of the mind means the impurities of the mind, which are raga and dvesha, attachments, unhealthy attachments, and aversions, are dealt with completely. Such a pure mind enjoys peace, serenity, tranquility, and composure. Such a pure mind understands the truth, nirmohatve, nischala tattva. The tranquil mind becomes objective, able to understand exactly what the scriptures tell us. Until then, whatever we hear, whatever we read is processed by mind, distorted by raga dveshas, likes and dislikes. When those distractions are no longer there, the mind is able to appreciate the unfoldment of the vision of the scriptures. Our mind understands very clearly what the scriptures reveal. One slowly develops an abidance in that knowledge. Our mind, antakaran, goes through a process of hearing about, emotive, making efforts to fully grasp, cognitive, and finally know, cognitive, Brahman, called Brahman called Nididhyasana, which is an integrative and transformative state. Nididhyasana is a continuum of Shravan, that means attentively listening, Manana, that means carefully reflecting. But whereas the first two, Shravan and Manana, are merely preliminary and intellectual, it is only the experience which contemplation affords, Anubhava, is transformative and called Nididhyasana. Now, Anubhava is accorded a status of an independent means of knowledge, pramana. It is the basis on which all knowledge of supersensuous rests, the equivalent in the spiritual context of direct perception in the empirical world. Now, this reference comes directly from Professor Ram Bachan's book called Accomplishing the Accomplished. And following that state, there is a freedom even while one is alive. Nishchala tattve, jivan mukti. After having given the systematic approach as to how you, from maintaining a good company, satsangatve, all the way to jivan mukti, then Shankara raised a question, Nyate tattve kah kausara. That means, where can there be sansara as we know it when the truth of one's identity is realized? When we know who we really are, there are no longer the need for continuous cycles of birth, growth, decay, disease, and death, because we know who we are. We don't have to become something else. We already are there. He concluded this important verse by stating that self non-acceptance arises out of the ignorance of our true nature. When that ignorance is no more, and one understands and realizes tattva, or the truth of the self, or as it who we really are, the need for samsara goes away. It's not only this ignorance, but also the false notions or misconceptions about oneself, as beautifully described, Nirvana Shatakam, are also removed. So basically, we learned that we as human beings are none other than awareness, which is an integral part of cosmic awareness, Chit, which is always present and thus immortal, Sat, and is unlimited and happy, Ananta and Ananda. Thus, the individual who once was trying to become a person who's adequate and acceptable comes to realize that he already was such an individual, just like the missing 10th person in that famous story that we discussed last time. There's no more indeed the need of this samsara or the unending transmigration of the various life cycles and birth and death. Then Shankara continued to advise us, Ma kuru dhanajana yauvana garvam hadati nimeshat kalas sarvam. Take no pride in your worldly possessions, dhana. People you command, jana, or beauty of your youthfulness, yovana garvam. Time loots away all this in a small time of time. And after you know the illusory nature of all these, you should realize that a state of Brahman and enter into it. That means Mayamayam idam akhilam hitva. Knowing that this is only transitory, Brahmapadam tvam pavisha viditva. Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. So most human beings, he reminded, are bogged down because of their false vanities and hollow conceits. They keep on bragging about their wealth, large number of employees they hired so that they command their respect, and the youth or beauty they possess. Of course, wealth, what I'm talking about, includes power, position, name, and fame, etc. They do not realize that the Father Time can and often does instantly loot all these so called accomplishments. Shankara reminded us by knowing the illusory nature of these. Now, illusory nature is, that means it's a product of Maya. Now, Maya in Sanskrit means magic, but our practical understanding, it means its existence is transient. There's no permanence. You must recognize that this youth, this wealth, litany of friends and family are transient, and hence they have no everlasting happiness that can come through them. Hence, one must renounce them. Now, remember again, reminding one over time again. In Vedanta, renunciation is not an action. Renunciation is a state of mind, a certain attitude toward the things of the world. In renouncing, we do not do something or discard something outwardly. Renunciating is nothing but seeing it for what it is and knowing the true worth of the things. So you don't have to change anything except thing changing. Recognize everybody's worth, importance, and don't change anything else. Don't discard anything. Continue, but understand this, unfortunately, is transient. Shankara concluded this verse by saying, Brahma Padam Tvam Pravisha Nividitva. You should instead simply realize the state of Brahman and enter and stay there. Having learned that entire world or this creation is transient and illusory, recognize that Brahman is the only thing that remains constant and never changes. That's why that famous statement comes, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. The final verse of Muhammad Gara, Mr. sayings of Shankara that came out of mouth of Shankara, one must think of the ordainer, Niyanta. He told us that we're always worrying since we erroneously think that we are the only ones who earn all this wealth with our hard work and talent and take care of everyone in the family and the friend circle. I'm the one who does everything. Lord Shri Krishna reminded us in the 9th chapter, Ananyas chintayanto mam ye janah paryupasate tesham nityabhayuktanam yogakshemam vahamyam. 22nd verse. Those who devoutly worship me, always meditating on my transcendental form, I bring for them what they lack and I preserve what they already have. The ordainer of Brahman in charge of Yogakshema, meaning brings all the things to the devotees and protects as well those which are already there with the devotees. Hence, we as devotees should not waste our time and energy for that purpose, but instead utilize it judiciously to regain the knowledge of one's true nature, the Brahman, starting with heartfelt prayers to that ordainer, Lord Govinda, and continuing them all through the life. At the conclusion of the masterpiece, he offered a perfect metaphor that if you use a boat to go through the challenging human existence, like traveling on the boat in open seas, one is protected on the guidance of the captain, of the guru, and in the company of good people who already have viveka, that means understand what is right what is not right, what is ethical, what is unethical. Padmapat said that renunciation is difficult without true understanding, and people pashyadnapi chana pashyati. That means they know what they're supposed to do, but they work like charlatans, misusing the offered privileges by changing different kinds of clothes are different, the hair style is different. Totaka, who became in charge of the Badrinath, Martin Uttarakhand, as a matter of Padmapat became in charge of Jagannath Puri, as I mentioned. He described beautifully, body has been worn out, angam galitam. The head has gone through palitam mundam. Toothless has become the mouth, dashana vihinam jatam tundam. Even then, this old man moves about, having taken up a cane, vruddho yati gruhitva dandam. Even then, he never leaves the bundle of desires. Tadapi na munchati asha pindam. And that's why I reminded Bhaja Govindam, Bhaja Govindam. Very powerful statement by these young disciples. What Totakacharya's message was clear, crystal clear, that maturity must arrive with age. This man who is leaning on his wooden staff, danda, because unable to carry out his own weight, still seems to carry a tremendous burden on his head, consisting of a variety of desires, expectations, hopes, and cravings. Instead of developing emotional maturity, which implies becoming free from dependence and intense attachment, he still wants to have something more. Of course, Sri Krishna said the same thing in the second chapter, Indriyani pramatini haranti prasabam manana. Then disciple Subodha said, no one can gain moksha or freedom without gaining the knowledge of Brahman. Jnana vihina sarvamatena bhajatina muktim janmashatena. So one may go to pilgrimage, where the sacred Ganges is there, meets the ocean, Kuruti Ganga Sagaram, or observe vows, or to distribute charity, vratapalam, atva danam. But if one does not have first-hand experience, jnana vihina, according to all schools of thought, sarvamatena, it doesn't matter, he goes through 100 life cycles as a human being, he is not going to seek, going not to understand at all. As a matter of fact, it's an interesting statement in Atmabodha about it. Pakasya vannivat adnyanam vina mokshono siddhyati. That means just as an individual masters the cooking skills only by mastering the intricacies of fire firsthand. Pakasya vannivat jnanam. The knowledge is gained through first-hand experience can liberate one from never-ending cycles of birth and death. Vina moksho no siddhyati. So you have to get the knowledge. Jnanam vina moksho no siddhyati. Nityananda has written a couple of two beautiful verses in this. He himself was bright, wise, and entirely happy, and always in such a state of ecstasy. One who was awakened to the wisdom. And he said, Yogarato va bhogarato, sangarato va sangavihina, yasya brahmani ramate chittam nandati nandatyev. One who was awakened to this wisdom is immaterial whether he is in the crowd or living in the solitude, whether he is in bhoga or yoga. In whatever condition he may live, his is a real joy and can be seen on his face and his body language. In that enlightened state, nothing else pleases him, and no worldly things are desired for self-gratification by him. Brahma Veda, Brahmaiva Bhavati, said in Mundaka Upanishad. Realized sense thereafter live sporting with the self. Now, they revel in the self and ever in the service of the world. The Atma Krida, reveling, and Atma Rati. Now, let me go step by step. A wise person enjoys all the three levels of happiness in the knowledge of Brahman. He is satisfied, he is happy, and he rejoices. Shri Krishna describes the wise man as Atmarati, one who reveals himself. He's one who is Atmatrupta, one who content with himself, and Atmanyeva Santushta, one who is satisfied with himself. There are three levels of happiness. To begin with, we are happy when we think of an object we like. Then we are happier when we acquire that object. And finally, we are the happiest when we enjoy that object. Basically, three different degrees of happiness: Rati, Trupti, and Santushti. For instance, when one thinks about favorite dish that your wife promised you will be there for dinner that night, the very idea gives that individual happiness the entire day. He is Atmarati, he is thinking about that food, unfortunately. When he gets home and smells the great fragrance of that favorite dish that he always loved his life, his happiness is multiplied many times. But finally, when he takes the seat at the dinner table and tastes and enjoys the dish, his happiness is complete. Atmarati, Atmatrupti, and Atmasantushti. Other thing to remember is Shankaracharya is teaching to his disciples who are all renunciates. Wisdom is not associated with any particular lifestyle like you have to be renunciate. Because he said, Krishno bhogi, shuko yogi, nrupo janaka raghavo, karmanishta vasishtadhyaha, sarvete jnaninaha samaha. Lord Sri Krishna enjoyed pleasure, bhogi. Say Shuka was ascetic, yogi. Janaka and Rama were kings. Says Vasishtha and others were devoted to performance of various rituals, but each one of them were equal as a wise person. And of course, Sri Krishna in the third chapter has taught us that Lokesmin Vividanishta Pura Prokta Mayanaga Jnana Yogena Sankhyanam Karma Yogena Yoginam. That means twofold committed lifestyle in this world is perfect according to me. I told that earlier. Pursuit of knowledge, Sankhyanam, renunciates, and pursuit of Karma Yoga for those who pursue the life of activity. Then we learned about spiritual practices to gain the freedom from death. Bhagavad Gita, Kinchita Gita, Ganga Jala Lavakanika Gita. That means basically study Gita. And of course, Ganga Jala Lavakanika, you're talking about, it can be taken not only as a water of Ganges, but of course, you can always look at it as Akash Ganga, that means spiritual knowledge that came directly from Sadashiva through the teacher in between, Shankaracharya, till the recent guru who gave me the ultimate knowledge. But you do need that guru who can direct you and help you navigate your way through the harbor to get that to the correct place of safety. And subsequently, the disciple cried out, please help me. Punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi jathari janane shatareshanam. So please say me, Shri Krishna. Ye samsare bahudustare krupaya pare pahi murare. So he was there to get ye samsare bahudustare. Here in the samsara, which is hard to cross, or life cycles of samsara considered huge and difficult to cross, just like huge boundless ocean is. So that for that, you need Murari. Murari is one who kills all the demons. He's talking Mura, but as we discussed in the previous discussions, those six inner enemies that we have, Kama, Krodha, Lobha, Moha, Mada, and Matsya. That means lust, anger, greed, delusion, arrogance, and jealousy. And the stories, as you in Purana, as always, gods and demons. But basically, the key is to make sure that you basically start praying. And at the beginning, you go, Chaturbhuja Bhajante Mam. Who are those? Who's in crisis, Artha, inquisitive to know who we are, people who want to get something for the material life, artharthi. But most importantly, we have to reach that state where we continue to pray as jnani, that means who understand who we really are. And last time we concluded with the verse Artham Anartham Nityam Bhavaya. Wealth is calamitous, thus reflect constantly. No asti sukhalesha. The truth is, there is no happiness at all to be gotten from it. To rich, there is a fear even from his own son, and this is the ardent way of wealth all over. As a matter of fact, Bhagavad says, Arthasya sadhane siddhe utkarshe rakshane vyaye. Every step of the way, there is a pain, there is an exertion, fear, anxiety, and delusion while acquiring, protecting, and spending. So basically, it is artham is anartham. That is how we concluded last time's discussion. Now, I want to start with a couple of verses, so we have enough time for everybody to comment and question. With pranayamam pratyaharam, nitya nitya viveka vicharam, japya sameta samadhi vidhanam, kurovadhanam madhavadanam. I think this is the 30th verse. Pranayam, control of breath. Pratyaharam, withdrawal of the senses. Nitya, anitya, viveka, vicharam, discrimination between permanent and impermanent. Along with absorption of mind through japa, japya sameta samadhi vidhanam, kurovadhanam, madhavadhanam. Perform these with great care. Please, with great care. Now, when we are asked to control breath, pranayam, this must be taken as the control of all our faculties, which implies exercising control of all our enjoyments. Yuktahara viharasya, yukta cheshtasya karmatu, yukta swapnava bodhasya, yogo bhavati dukkha. The one who is moderate in eating and other activities, moderate in effort with reference to duties, to sleeping and waking hours, meditation becomes the destroyer of the self. Only when you are able to all do this control, there has to be a sense of proportion in everything that we do in our life. Have a sense of proportion not only in food, walking, and moving around, and also when we talk. Talk only when necessary. Talk whenever is proper. Talk whatever is right. Talk whatever is pleasant. Talk whatever is truthful. One should be alert in everything we do, even while we are driving. Do not waste any time or effort. The sense of proportions should be for sleeping habits as well as recreational activities. Do not be lazy. At the same time, don't get exhausted either. Whatever you do, whenever you do it, remain focused and not get distracted, like the story of Arjuna, with eye focused only on the left eye of the bird, with the arrow attached to the bow, as instructed by his guru Dronacharya. The focus has to be exactly what the goal is. So thus pranayama is the control of breath, means control of all sense organs of perception and action, hands, legs, speech, eyes, ears, etc. From pranayam pratyahara, that means pratyahara is withdrawal of the senses, is withdrawal of the mind from all its preoccupations and focusing on the task at hand. Nitya, anitya, viveka, vichara. That is, in discrimination of viveka between nitya and anitya. What is permanent, what is impermanent, the desirable or undesirable, conducive to my goals or obstructive to those. Any moment when we undertake any action, take a brief moment to ask ourselves, if my action is going to help my goals, am I on the correct path? If the answer is no, don't take that action. Now, this is an important statement coming up. Japya sameta samadhi vidhan. Samadhi means relaxation of the mind, absorption of the mind. When mind is devoid of any distractions and disturbances, it becomes silent. That silence is the total relaxation of the mind, the absorption or total abidance of the mind. In Sri Krishna says in 6th chapter and 25th verse, Atma saustham manah krutva no kinchit apichintayet. By making the mind abide in the self, may not one think of anything else. That's when the mind is free from all distractions. The mind abides. So samadhi here means abidance of the mind in the self. How do you do it? By being japya samet. That means doing japa, the repetition of the holy names, Shiva, Narayana, Ganesha, whatever you like. When you are saying that japa, you know what the next word is. Nothing is going to disturb you from going away from that. And as we discussed in the last time, if you keep saying Om Shanti, 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 at the end of your chanting, your mind is going to be quiet. You say fire, fire, fire. All the protests that go on inappropriately, that is the kind of anger that comes up. Toward the end of the verse, he's saying, Kurva Vadanam, Mahada Vadanam. Do it every day and do it that carefully, very carefully with great care. All this has to be done with patience and care. We all tend to be always in a hurry. We want to achieve instant success. But remember, this is the 8th step of the Ashtanga Yoga. Samadhi doesn't come as the leader of batsman. The 8 different components to that. That is the last 8th one. The first 7 being yama, niyama, pranayama, asana, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Samadhi comes very end. So we need to be patient. It's not going to come instantly. But continue your process step by step. And trust me, you'll be able to reach samadhi. The final verse that Shankaracharya said is very powerful. He said, Guru Charanambuja Nirbhara Bhakta. Guru Charanambuja Nirbhara Bhakta. Samsarat Achirat Bhava Mukta. Sendriya Manasa Niyamat Evam Dakdevam Dakshasi Nija Rudayastham. Let me take one Sanskrit phrase at a time. Guru Charanambuja Nirbhara Bhakta. O the devotee who is of the lotus feet of the teacher, that means he's an ardent devotee of the feet of the teacher. Samsarat Achirat Muktaha Bhava. May you become liberated from samsara, because Shankaracharya is blessing his disciples. Through the control of the sense organs and the mind, Sendriya Manasa Niyamat, so Indriya Manasa Niyamat, that means control of sense organs and mind. Nija Hridaya Sam Devam Dakshasi. You'll come to realize the Lord that dwells in your own heart. Just as Professor Rambachan described in his last session of Nirvana Shadak, why is the devotion to the teacher emphasized so much? Such devotion includes devotion to what teacher stands for. His devotion to the scriptures, Guru's devotion to God, Guru's devotion to the tradition, Guru's devotion to the knowledge. Devotion means reverence and surrender. Love between the teacher and student is very special, and we could see that on the face of Professor Ambachan when he concluded Nirvana Shatak. As a matter of fact, it's interesting. Quotation Shvetashvara Upanishad 623. Yasya deve para bhakti yatha deve tatha gurau tasyaite katita yartha prakashante mahatmana. One who has total and supreme devotion to Lord. Yasya deve para bhakti. And the same for the devotion for the teachers of Lord. Yatha deve tatha guru. Tasyaite katita hi artha. The mind of such a person will the words of the scriptures reveal their meaning. Artha prakashante mahatmana. For that great person, those meanings of those scriptures will be revealed. So exactly the same idea is expressed by Shankaracharya as he's blessing his disciples, and through that process, blessing us, each and every one of us. I'm open up for a question and session.
I enjoyed your session, beautiful as usual, but it's really nice to have one full summary of the whole Bhaja Govindam. That's one of my favorite scripture as well. I just was wondering while you were explaining that both the Bhagavad Gita and Bhaja Govindam are kind of the summarizing of the Upanishads and the spiritual aspects of our scriptures. So kind of summarizing what a extract of this is. So what do you think is the difference? Like, which is there a difference, or are both kind of giving overall the same message? Curious about that, if you have any thoughts.
Well, good question, Arvind. When you're talking about poles of wisdom, every pole has all the qualities that are needed. So that if you understand the subject matter, doesn't matter how big a scripture it is, how big a writing it is, you connect with it right off the bat, Arvind. Okay. But if you're talking about an exhaustive description, which summarizes all the Sarva Upanishad Gavo, Dogdha Gopalananda. So that way, Gita is much more comprehensive than Bhaja Govindam is. This is just spontaneous discussion that took place at the banks of the river Ganges. So it always contains the truth. For example, the teacher teaches you whatever he or she says, it contains all the valuable lessons anyway. But if you want to say comprehensive, it doesn't. So I don't know if it's not a criticism at all. Don't misunderstand me. Since you asked me a comparison, it's difficult to compare.
Yeah, I think you explained it beautifully. I think one is as you read any scientific paper, there's always a abstract. So and then there's abstracts of abstract. So this is obviously if you want to go details, you have to read the bigger part.
Original article, right?
So you are saying that Bhagavad Gita has more detail and larger aspect and much more detail. So that makes
and the practical sense is this way: is that it's difficult for an average person to read all the Upanishads himself or herself. But unfortunately, very people understand Sanskrit in the first place. But reading Gita, and if somebody is able to connect those original verses from the Upanishads, that becomes even more powerful, because even Gita cannot give the details of it because of the shortness of the scriptures. I'm talking 700 is short, but that's the way it is. But if you're taking a particular topic, then you can certainly bring the original references and go in depth. So I think that's the reason why Kumar and myself, when we send you the notes, we write those references too, so that if you are ever curious to go to the even deeper depth than we have taken you, you're welcome to do that. So,
question is regarding Vyasa the Sage, and I guess I'm wondering, is this I've heard about this name several times, I guess, over the centuries. So is this a title or is this a person?
He is considered a person. There are six people who are called Chiranjeeva, that means who do not ever die. Ashwathama, Balir Hanuma, Vibhishana. So these are the people who, Parshuram is the last one. So they lived all the time. So Vyasa is a recognized person who is present. But the one we are talking about is Krishna Dvaipayan Vyas. He was at the time of Sri Krishna, and I can tell you more about it, but any specific question? He's the one who compiled all the Vedas and put them together. But in order to put them together, you have to read them all, understand them all, and put them. Of course, Veda were put together by Ganesha too, because he's the one who was putting it together. He was the one he was the writing it down with hands. I don't know if I'm making clear or not, but Vyasa is the thing who compiled all the Vedas, put them together systematically.
So is this the same person then who's coming to Shankarcharya
Exactly.
later on? Okay.
Yes, because since he doesn't ever die, immortal, he's able to come from time to time.
Okay.
For example, the same thing with Hanuman. He was there with Rama, but he's also with the chariot of Arjuna. You understand what I mean?
Sure. Okay.
Those spirits exist all through the times.
Dr. Sane, the story of Ganesh ji writing, Veda, and we know that Veda was an oral tradition.
Yes.
So there is a conflict there.
No, what is happening, Arun, is in the past there was no method of writing it down and keeping it for records. Everything was passed on from fathers and mothers to children. They remember them. That's why the Trivedi, Chaturvedis, you see what I mean? So that remembering different types of Vedas,
Yes.
Samavedis, Krishna Vedis, some of them knew all of them. But later on, when the writing became possible and storing became possible, then somebody had to put them together. And again, from the story point of view, Arun, these are, remember, stories from Puranas. So you have to take it from the grain of salt. But the key is somebody who was able to understand it and write it intelligently. So even then, when who was telling it, he had to comprehend it. That's what one of the condition was. That means in order to digest all that, he could dictate it slowly, because when writing it was not easy, or describing it orally was not easy either. So from that point of view. And the thing is, Ganesha, if you remember the story, with tremendous memory too, with a big brain. So besides big stomach too, but that's different. Is that Arun who's laughing?
No, it's brought, not me.